What's going on, everyone? 59% of the S&P 500 closed down in the red today, and the market took quite the beating as there was some heavy selling pressure, especially with tech stocks. There's a lot going on in the stock market and the world right now, as vaccine stocks are even on the rise after the first human U.S. bird flu death. And on top of that, today Trump said that he's looking to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. So we have a lot to cover, and there's definitely a lot going on right now.
Yeah, we definitely do. Between the vaccine stocks and, of course, the tech stocks today, there is a whole bunch on the radar. But, Mike, I would say the most important thing today is what happened to Nvidia with the CES event. Oh, my gosh. Nvidia ended up falling down 6.2% today at close. And I would say in pre-market today, Nvidia was looking pretty fire. It was actually moving higher, well above 150 and holding up well. But whenever the market opened, something shifted. I don't know what happened, Mike. The big boys came into play and sold this off or something. But nonetheless, Nvidia came tanking back down, and it looked like consumers just really weren't overly wowed by this CES event. Plus, Nvidia's a little overextended right now. But at the end of the day, they made that new all-time high, and then they came roaring right back down. So it was a weird day for Nvidia with price action. And everybody's asking themselves, what is going on right now? And I think it was just, I would say, the non-wowing effect of this event. Plus, people are just trying to take profits right now.
And can you blame people given the big events that we have on the schedule for later in the year, as well as just the risks we have in the world right now, whether it be political uncertainty or even, geopolitical problems all around the world. But either way, as we look at Nvidia, their CES event, I would say was generally pretty decent. The stock reacted positively not only in after hours, but also in pre-market this morning. But once the market opened is when the floodgates really opened. And I think in the simplest sense, there are some big players in the market right now using some of this short-term optimism as nice, easy exit liquidity. And again, I can't really blame them for doing that either, but in terms of like a stock sense, when you have Nvidia get rejected this hard right at open, it says a lot not only about the supply and demand dynamics for Nvidia stock, but this also has a giant ripple effect onto a lot of other areas of the market, because when you have, at least as of yesterday, the world's largest company, selling off in a major way, that affects everything else. And I think that played a big role into, the further sell-off that we saw today, not only, just with the S&P 500, but a lot of individual companies within it.
Yeah, and it was a pretty rough day out there. The heat map was pretty red. Of course, there's always a little bit of green mixed in, but even like Tesla was down 4%, Amazon 2%, Meta had a red day as well. But these chip stocks really were just showing a lot of weakness today, and I think that really spilled over, like you said, into the SPY. And whenever we even look at the SPY today, it was like there kept trying to be these times and periods throughout the day where buyers would try to buy the S&P 500 back up, and it was just a constant fury of lower high after, guess what, more lower highs. It was a pretty crazy day in that sense, but it was a fun day for trading. And whenever there's so much downside momentum in the market like this, definitely keep your eyes on some stocks like SPXS and maybe even the VIX, VIX and UVXY, which you can use to trade the VIX if you want to. But 8.87% on UVXY today, definitely no slouch there either.
Definitely. And even ETFs like SQQQ, that popped up by 5.5%. So whether you look at, ETFs like any of the ones mentioned, or even, good old fashioned SPY put options or other put options, they're worth considering when the market is falling. Like, yes, it's awesome to watch the market rip up to new all-time highs and ride the bull train. But, to succeed over the long term with trading, you have to be willing to, adapt with the trend changes and be happy to, change your directional bias, because that's just a reality of trading. So definitely keep that in mind. And, the market is certainly going to be pretty exciting over these next couple weeks, especially as, there's an upcoming transition of power with the White House. And one thing that was especially eye-catching today was what's going on over at Meta and with Mark Zuckerberg. So there were two things here. The first thing is that Mark Zuckerberg kind of, flipped from his past habits, and he's basically getting rid of fact checkers and replacing that with community notes like they're seen on X. But even more importantly, that I would say, is that Dana White just got added to Meta's board. For those of you who don't know, Dana White is a big Trump ally, and I think this is actually a pretty smart move on Zuckerberg's part, because as you get closer to those who are more politically connected with Trump, that can, that could help Meta and just Mark Zuckerberg, navigate these next 4 years in like a more advantageous way.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I thought that was really good news by Meta. Now, of course, some people might not like that news, depending on if you like Dana White or not. But definitely let me know in the comments how you feel about this for Meta going down in the future. And I think that Zuckerberg, Mike, has done a great job at resurrecting his image over the past couple years. He used to be known as like the AI villainous robot guy. Now he's known as the cool guy wakeboarding, flying American flags. So it's definitely a different Zuckerberg and a different Meta than we've seen. And kind of looking at Meta's stock, I was hoping that this would give them some more action today, but they just could not escape the selling pressure that hit the overall market. But as we look at Meta over the past few years, I mean, I think that image shift has been very good for the stock, of course, too.
Big time. Like, seriously, Zuckerberg has changed so much over the past couple of years, from, like you said, everything you listed, and even doing jujitsu and everything else. It's been a pretty funny thing to watch, honestly. But looking at Meta stock, I think this is, I think this can definitely help Meta over the long term. Over the short term, they're really just going to move with the market as a whole. But I think the deeper message that needs to be conveyed here is that there is going to be a lot changing politically in the short term. Of course, we have the inauguration in just a couple of weeks, and there's a lot that's going to come along with that. Trump has said some pretty bold statements in the short term, not only in terms of, Panama and the Panama Canal, but also in regards to Greenland and a whole bunch of other stuff. So basically, we are going to see bigger, crazier things and moves in the market pretty soon. And for those of you who weren't around when the last time Trump was in office, he likes to tweet, and those tweets move the markets quite a bit. So understand that the market we are about to see is going to be something that is naturally different than what we have seen over the past couple of years. And this is something that is good, because when you see big changes in the market and just the world in general, it often brings about pretty solid opportunities. So we just like to, talk about things, ahead of time to, kind of give everyone some time to prepare and be aware of them. But yeah, we're set for a pretty exciting 2025.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why the market's actually been starting to see a lot of shakiness. Of course, we don't just have uncertainty with the Federal Reserve next year with rate cuts. Now we have uncertainty with all these things Trump are talking about. I've heard him even talking about potentially switching some of the tariffs that he's talked about and certain things like that. So there's a lot of flip-flopping going on here, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to get ironed out. And the market, of course, has been pretty shaky, since the SPX has posted that all-time high back there in the middle of this, or at the beginning of December, that FOMC meeting. Ever since then, the market has seen nothing but really selling. So it's going to be an interesting beginning of Trump's presidency, that's for sure. He is inheriting, I would say, a pretty good market overall, but of course, this short-term weakness does put a slight dampening on this.
No doubt. So we'll definitely cover more about some specific SPY levels to keep on watch in just a minute. But let's talk a little bit more about what's going on with this bird flu situation. So we'll first look at ticker symbol mRNA. Moderna, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with COVID, had a pretty good day today as it popped up by just under 12%. And this is a pretty big move, not only just in general, but also for Moderna stock, because it is a company that has definitely been struggling quite a bit over the past few years. And one thing that I think is extremely interesting, Tom, is that Moderna is at about the same level as that around like the COVID pandemic. Basically during COVID, Moderna went from like around like $25 a share all the way up to like $60 a share at first, but then exploded all the way up to like $500 a share. Since that point, it lost 90% of its value and it's back below 50 again. And it's starting to get more momentum in the short term. Essentially, there is basically what happened recently is the first bird flu death was reported in the U.S., and it was in Louisiana. And of course, naturally, some fears come along with that. There are at least 67 cases that have been recorded in the U.S. so far, but this is something that is starting to get a bit of attention, and it's definitely helping Moderna stock.
Yeah, it really is in the short term, and this might even spread some fear out there, of course. I know a lot of people might get kind of freaked out, of course, whenever you talk about stuff like this, it can get freaky, but, I've been hearing things like it could be in milk, obviously. I've been seeing things where it's in cat food, potentially, as well, so, we're not trying to, spark or create any fear here, but it's just something that could naturally happen, and with that could end up helping Moderna's stock. I do like the move today, up 11%, and this stock does love catalysts like this, so, let's just say that the situation gets a little bit worse and Moderna actively starts producing a lot of these vaccines. This could be a pretty good situation for them as a business. But at the end of the day, I will say I'm praying that this situation doesn't happen. I'd rather Moderna stock stay low, honestly.
I agree, definitely. And I think realistically, the only way that this stock can have a truly explosive move is if we continue to see more attention with this sort of situation. If this is something that just fizzles out, throughout next week and everyone kind of forgets about it, then I don't really think there's going to be too much opportunity. But again, it really depends on how it all develops. So let's just keep it on the radar. But talking more about, some key things with the market overall today, there was a lot of selling pressure. So, Tom, what is going on in the market right now? It looks like we're seeing a continuation of that lower high pattern, which is certainly not a good thing for the bulls.
Oh my gosh, Mike, it worked out so perfectly. We've been talking about $600 over the past few trading days, and guess where SPY rejected today? Right around that $600 marker. I should say rejected yesterday. Today was just a good continuation of that rejection, but with that move lower today, yes, that trend of the lower highs is now playing out, and now we're back down into the middle of the chop zone. Now, we do have a short-term higher low going on as well, and it looks like as the SPY drops, over the next couple days, we'll be hitting that around 584 to 585. So I'm definitely going to be watching 584 to 585 as a major area of support. If we break under there, I will target the recent low around 580. And then, of course, another recent low around 578. I think 578 and 580 are major. We've been saying that a lot for the past few weeks. And Mike, I hate to come on here and keep saying the same levels all the time, but that's what happens whenever SPY doesn't do anything, right? And is stuck. But it's playing within this range very, very well. And there's a lot of people who've identified this $600 rejection as we've been talking about it, and they've been adapting back down and doing very well. And you can do this with puts, or you can play SPXS or SQQQ or UVXY even.
Love it. And Tom, I have to give you a huge shout out because you have been on point with your SPY levels, especially in the short term, and they've been so helpful just in general. So shout out to you, Tom. And, the market is at a key point right now where I think a lot of what will happen in the short term will be determined by big tech stocks. When we look at the heat map, it says a lot when you have Nvidia down 6%, Amazon down 2.5%, Tesla down 4%, Meta down 2%, and all of these other stocks selling off. I mean, Palantir was down 8% today in addition to the recent sell-off that it has already had. So basically looking at big tech stocks and just tech in general is going to be the key in the short term, in my opinion. Not only do they have such a large direct influence on the S&P 500 as a whole, but they're also so closely tied to investor sentiment where it just has a very big impact, and it's something that shouldn't be ignored. So if we continue to see these stocks, either bleed out or just weaken in general, I think it's going to send a very important warning sign for the market as a whole. And again, that's not something that should be feared of. but rather adapted to. If the market goes up or down, it's more so just about adapting to the reality of the situation rather than, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. But yeah, I'm excited for like what's to happen in the short term.
Yeah, me too. There's been a lot of crazy action here in the short term. And looking at the SPY again, there was a pretty big sell-off this morning. And one of the bigger sell-offs of the day came in right at 10 a.m. Eastern time, whenever some of the economic data today came out, like the JOLTS job openings, which came in a little bit higher than expected. And that could be a little bit negative as the market's a little fearful that the Federal Reserve might not cut rates as quickly. So keep that in mind. And tomorrow, speaking of the Federal Reserve, we're going to have the FOMC minutes coming out at 2 p.m. Eastern time, so be ready for that. This will give more insight into what they talked about at the last FOMC meeting. And then we do have the earnings starting to pick up a little bit. Tomorrow there is Jeffries and after hours. Besides that, not too much. Thursday we got KBH, and then Friday Tilray, Delta, and Walgreens. But that's pretty much the rundown here for the events for the rest of the week.
And then, Tom, while we're on the schedule for earnings and economic data, we might as well also remind everyone that the market will be closed on Thursday in observance of the death of Jimmy Carter. So keep that in mind. The market will be closed on Thursday. But besides that, Tom, we are all set for some setups and predictions. A stock that is definitely on my radar is ticker symbol RGTI. I talked about this stock in a bearish way in yesterday's video. Today it fell by nearly 6%, which was good to see, and I think it can fall more. The stock has strong resistance right around this $20 area, and it has what I believe to be pretty weak support right around like $17.55, which it just broke through in after hours right now, which is a good sign for the bears. Long story short, the stock is pretty overextended, the stock has heavy resistance overhead, and it's already starting to weaken. For those reasons, I am bearish on RGTI in the short term. This is not just a play for tomorrow, but even one that could last into like the middle of next week and possibly even longer than that.
Wow, that is a pretty bearish signal there to see that support giving out. I definitely like this one down, Mike. I like that $20 resistance that you talked about yesterday. That played out perfectly into this morning. I'll definitely keep watching it for more of a turnover here. Pretty advantageous of a setup. With my first play, I'm looking at UVXY. How could we not, right? And I'm going to go back to the VIX because I want to go look at the VIX on the daily chart. The VIX has been in a bit of a weird pattern lately, and it's kind of consolidating. But what I'm looking for is for the VIX to start to shoot above this recent high. And when I say recent high, I'm talking about right around $19.50 to $20. Over the next few trading days, that's what I'm kind of looking for as the market sells off. As that happens, UVXY should get a pretty good boost off of these lower levels, possibly up to around like $24, $25 or plus. And we could see some good movement, kind of like what we saw a couple weeks ago whenever the SPY started to really sell off in a pretty good way. So that's what I'm looking for, Mike. UVXY, it's a pretty good short-term scalping type of stock. Now, it's not a stock that you want to buy and hold for too long because it does decay over time, but in the short term, when the market's dropping and volatility is increasing, it goes up quite a bit.
Love to see it. All right, with my next setup, I'm looking at one that some people certainly aren't going to like, but that's okay. We are looking at Nvidia, and it is to the downside. Nvidia has had so much positivity over the past week, and the chip sector overall has been pretty strong as well in the short term, but the price action we saw today sends a major message, in my opinion. The intensity and consistency of the selling pressure that we saw at open represents a lot about how the supply and demand dynamic is shifting. I think big investors used some of the short-term euphoria with Nvidia and just chips overall as great exit liquidity. And honestly, I can't really blame them either. Either way, Nvidia stock was down quite a bit today. It rejected hard, pretty close to all-time highs, and the market itself is weakening. For that reason, I am looking at Nvidia in a bearish way, not like specifically for tomorrow, but definitely in the short term. So that goes out to next week, and honestly, even for like the next like month or so. I'm pretty skeptical of this price action, and it's definitely on my bearish radar.
Yeah, I think the only saving grace for Nvidia today was that there was good support at 140 because it ended up holding there pretty well. But if I see 140 break down tomorrow, I'm definitely going to keep watching it as well. One thing that does worry me, Mike, let me know your thoughts on this really quick. Sometimes after these big selling days like this, we might see like a little day of consolidation or something. Is that why maybe you mentioned it's a play maybe for the next couple days?
Yeah, exactly. Like that definitely plays into it. We could see in after hours it is already bouncing up a little bit. And as, like you mentioned, we have seen throughout history where Nvidia has like a really big red day like today, and then, in the short term you could have like a little bit of consolidation for like just a little bit and then a continuation of the trend. But yes, definitely.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure there, but with my next setup, I'm looking at ticker symbol C, Citigroup, to the upside, actually. Now, this is a bit of a different play, but Citigroup actually did pretty well today, up 1.29%, and I'm really liking the daily chart setup with Citigroup, how it's making a new recent high, and actually, if we scroll back, it's not an all-time high, but it's approaching some recent highs, I should say, around $80, and I'm going to be looking for that area to test again. But either way, Citigroup, I think that banks could end up going under the radar. Even if tech sells off, banks could end up doing just fine. As you saw, even in the middle of the day today, Citigroup roared right back up. So if they break the high of day from today, around 74.30, I'm going to keep watching them to the upside. But at the same time, if they do end up falling down like under 73, probably a no play.
All right, sounds good. Well, besides that, Tom, we are all set for today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have CCJ to the downside.
Yeah, a lot of these overpriced stocks in the short term are starting to roar back down, but CCJ has a pretty good support around $51 from recently where it's bounced a couple of times. So if it breaks under 51, then keep watching CCJ down.
All right, with the next one, we have Hood also to the downside.
Robinhood, another one starting to sell off in the short term. If Robinhood can break under $40 even, then watch them down.
And with the last one, we have Palantir also to the downside.
Poor Palantir. Now, we called this one out yesterday, and there was a lot of people who loved this setup this morning. We were actually watching 74.60 for a break yesterday, and we saw a very clear break of that this morning, and a lot of people loved that setup. So we're going to be watching Palantir to the downside again for tomorrow. In after hours, it is pretty wild, but if it breaks under 69.75, then keep watching it down. I really like this $70 support, and 69.75 is right at the low of day.
Beautiful. All right, so we have Palantir, Hood, and CCJ on watch for potential momentum plays tomorrow if and only if they break through the levels listed. The stronger and more consistent these stocks move, the better the setups become. These stocks are volatile, have stop losses, and be happy to flow and adjust with the trend changes as always. So definitely keep that in mind. And besides that, it is now about that time for today's $1.8 million big money trade. And we are looking at ticker symbol ORA. So this is a renewable and geothermal energy company, and it has been selling off a decent amount over the past couple of weeks, and the big money is buying this dip. They bought the 70 strike call options for June 20th of 2025. For my advanced traders out there, this is technically a call debit spread where they also shorted the 80 strike calls. But either way, this is a bullish trade where they want the stock to go up. Looking more specifically at this stock and company in general, we have been, definitely seeing a recent sell-off, but I think that the big money might be entering into this trade as, they believe that the energy sector as a whole has a lot to gain. XLE is a ticker symbol that follows the energy sector, and it has been recovering pretty strongly over the past 2 weeks, and I think that the energy sector will get more attention going forward in multiple different senses once Trump takes office, not only with, the policies he is set to implement, but also with the entire geopolitical situation, especially related to like Russia and Ukraine and everything going on in the Middle East. I do think that the energy sector has a lot of attention that will be put towards it, which can definitely help just the whole sector in general. But either way, looking at ticker symbol ORA, I like the reward to risk here, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to give this trade the time it needs if you decide to follow it. These options have all the way out until the end of June for a reason.
Yeah, that's a long time. June 20th, 2025. It's a lot of money too. 1.8 million. I mean, not the most ever, but quite a bit. Definitely anything over a million always catches my eye, but ORA in the energy sector has been pretty interesting. And, I know oil and ORA, they might be intertwined a little bit, but crude oil has actually been coming up pretty well off of support. And it's been starting to break out of this little like wedge/channel that I was watching on it in a pretty good way. So if we continue to see this, I'm sure that ORA and a lot of these energy stocks will continue up in the short term at least. But this does have a lot of time to it. Like you said, this could be a play on maybe the new administration. Obviously switching the script a little bit on energy, because energy has been a pretty weird sector the past couple of years, especially with all the stuff going on globally and all the tensions and everything like that. I've been kind of surprised that some of these energy stocks have been dipping as much as they have been.
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty interesting, and crude oil has been running a bit in the short term, so I think we're set for a pretty exciting year, not only with, just the energy side of things, but just everything in general. There's a lot of change going on right now, and that normally brings some pretty big opportunities in a trading sense. And if you guys are new to the channel, consider obliterating that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. We post all the time and cover the most important news, big money trades, earnings, information, and setups to keep on your radar. It takes us hours to make these videos, and we cover just about everything in around 20 to 25 minutes or less. So if you want to hear from us more often, then demolish that subscribe button. But besides that, we also want to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Mr. J in the Profits channel in the Stocked Up Discord. They had a great profit trade with some SPY put options today, and they've been a great consistent member for quite a while now. So huge shout out to you, Mr. J, and keep up the great work going forward. Besides that, thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.